Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Ashmit Kumar, and here are the headlines that we're tracking this evening. Thousands flee Tehran after a new wave of attacks. Israel claims to have struck factories producing centrifuges and weapons. President Trump demands Iran's unconditional surrender and considers the possibility of direct U.S. strikes. Iran's supreme leader says that the battle begins as the conflict enters the sixth day. Global markets trade mixed as geopolitical tensions rise. Investors await U.S. Federal Reserve's rate decision later tonight. Crude oil prices remain firm, with Brent hovering around $76 per barrel. Sensex and Nifty end with marginal losses after a volatile session. Financial stocks outperform, but mid-caps underperform. Prime Minister Modi and President Trump hold a 35-minute phone conversation. Modi tells Trump India never has and never will accept third-party mediation on Pakistan dispute. Clarifies that no discussions were held with the US as a mediator or a trade deal during Operation Sindoor. President Trump is scheduled to host the Pakistani Army General at the White House today. India and Canada take the first step towards resetting the strained relationship. Both nations agree to appoint ambassadors after Prime Minister Modi meets Prime Minister Carney. The diplomatic ties were scaled down after Canada alleged India's involvement in the killing of a Sikh separatist in 2023. 6 days since the devastating Air India plane crash, 190 bodies have been identified as the DNA matching continues. 159 bodies released so far. Vishwas Kumar, the sole survivor in the plane crash, has been discharged from the hospital. India's aviation regulator says a surveillance conducted on Air India's 787 fleet following the Ahmedabad plane crash did not reveal any major safety concerns, but raises concerns over recent maintenance-related issues reported by the airline. At least 70 people waiting for food assistance killed by Israeli forces in the deadliest attack on aid sites. Reports suggest that more than 300 people have been killed at food assistance centers run by Israel and the US in the last 3 weeks. Government announces a 3,000 rupee annual pass for FASTag, which allows 200 trips on national highways. The pass will be available only for non-commercial vehicles like cars, jeeps and vans. Well, the top story this evening, the Israel-Iran conflict has entered the sixth day and the United States is considering direct involvement. Israeli Defense Forces claim to have struck factories producing centrifuges and weapons. Major explosions were reported in Tehran overnight. The extent of the damage remains unclear. Israeli Defense Minister said that Iran's supreme leader could face the same fate as former Iraq President Saddam Hussein. Meanwhile, Iran fired a pair of ballistic missiles barrages at Israel after Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei warned that the battle had begun. Sirens and explosions were heard over Tel Aviv. Israel said it intercepted most of the missiles. Khamenei also warned that Iranians will show no mercy to what he referred to as Israel's terrorist Zionist regime. The Iranian leader's comments came after US President Donald Trump demanded an unconditional surrender. Iranian media reports suggest that Khamenei has handed over key military powers to the Supreme Council of Iranian Military and relocated to an underground bunker. As per reports, Trump is also considering a range of options, including the possibility of direct US strikes on Iran. The US will shut its embassy in Jerusalem starting today till Friday. Meanwhile, the G7 summit in Canada concluded with a broadly worded statement that called for a de-escalation in tensions after Trump's early exit. It also said that Iran cannot be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon.
We do not want Iran to get nuclear weapons or have ballistic capabilities. I believe that the biggest error today is to seek a regime change in Iran through military means, because that would lead to chaos. Therefore, our responsibility is to resume discussions as quickly as possible to restore a framework for addressing the nuclear and ballistic issues. This is what France has consistently done for the past 10 years.
US President Donald Trump called for Iran's unconditional surrender Tuesday, ratcheting up tensions and marking a new escalation to the air war between longtime enemies Israel and Iran, now into its sixth day. After meeting with his National Security Council Tuesday to discuss the conflict, Trump wrote on Truth Social, "We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding," referring to Iran's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. While he said there was no intention to kill Iran's leader for now, he added, "Our patience is wearing thin." Minutes later, he posted, in all capital letters, "Unconditional surrender." Trump had spoken to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by phone on Tuesday, according to a White House official. Meanwhile, the US president also dismissed a verdict by his spy chief, Tulsi Gabbard, in March that Iran was not developing nuclear weapons. Responding to reporters on board Air Force One Tuesday, Trump said, quote, "I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having one." In clashing with his spy chief, Trump now appears to side with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's justification for launching strikes last week on Iranian nuclear and military targets. Iran expert Trita Parsi, the executive vice president of the Quincy Institute in Washington, D.C., says the latest developments have the U.S. on the brink of a major escalation and that the Iranians likely won't submit to Trump's demand.
If they don't trust that surrender actually is an option because they believe that once they were to agree to it, the Israelis would not be content with just destroying the nuclear program. They would go after the missile program, and then it would snowball to a whole set of other things. And as a result, I don't think that they think is an actual option. So if Trump goes and insists on surrender, if talks even take place, I think it will ensure war.
The U.S. is bolstering its forces in the Middle East with more fighter aircraft. Those include F-16s, F-22s, and F-35s, according to officials Tuesday, who stressed the jets will be used defensively to shoot down drones and projectiles. A large buildup of tanker aircraft to Europe and deployment of an aircraft carrier have also given additional options to Trump as the war continues. Iran denies seeking nuclear weapons and has pointed to its right to nuclear technology for peaceful purposes, including enrichment, as a party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Israel's Netanyahu, meanwhile, has stressed that he will not back down until Iran's nuclear development is disabled. Ever since Iran-backed Hamas attacked Israel on October 7, 2023, and triggered the Gaza war, Tehran's regional influence has waned. That was as Israel pounded Iran's proxies, from Hamas in Gaza to Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen.
Well, meanwhile, global markets traded mixed as tensions rise in the Middle East. Indian stock markets ended with minor cuts after a volatile day. The Sensex fell by 139 points, while the Nifty held on to the 24,800 level. The mid-cap index underperformed, keeping the market breadth in favor of declines. Now, speaking of market triggers, the U.S. Federal Reserve is set to deliver its policy decision today. According to a CNBC Fed survey, majority of respondents expected Fed to keep rates unchanged. The percentage of respondents expecting a recession in the U.S. has fallen to 38% from 53% in the month of May. However, USA's GDP in 2025 is expected to grow at 1.13%. That's a fall from expectations of a growth of 2.4% when respondents were polled in January. 54% also expect the U.S. to reach a new trade deal with China in the coming months. And in the commodities space, crude oil prices remain elevated as the Israel-Iran conflict intensified for the sixth consecutive day. Prices are now close to a 5-month high. The market remains worried about supply disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, which carries a fifth of the world's seaborne oil. India's chief economic advisor, V. Anantha Nageswaran, has said that higher oil prices raises essential risks for India.
The current conflict between Israel and Iran is an important development which may not be very very good for us, because what it has done is in the last 1 week or so, the price of crude oil has gone up to almost $73, $74 per barrel. It was in the low 60s. We were hoping that it would go below 60 because OPEC countries were looking to increase production for the third time in July. So this obviously raises important risks for India.
Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump held a 35-minute phone conversation after Trump cut short his G7 summit trip to Canada. This marked the first direct conversation between the two leaders since Operation Sindoor. As per a statement by Foreign Affairs Secretary Vikram Misri, PM Modi maintained that there was no mediation by the United States in the India-Pakistan conflict or any discussion about the trade deal during the conflict. Prime Minister Modi also stated that India has not and will not accept any form of mediation by a third party. President Trump accepted Prime Minister Modi's invitation to attend the next Quad meeting.
प्रधानमंत्री मोदी ने राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप को स्पष्ट रूप से कहा कि इस पूरे घटनाक्रम के दौरान कभी भी किसी भी स्तर पर भारत अमेरिका ट्रेड डील या अमेरिका द्वारा भारत और पाकिस्तान के बीच मध्यस्थता जैसे विषयों पर बात नहीं हुई थी। सैन्य कार्रवाई रोकने की बात सीधे भारत और पाकिस्तान के बीच दोनों सेनाओं की एग्जिस्टिंग चैनल्स के माध्यम से हुई थी और पाकिस्तान के ही आग्रह पर हुई थी। प्रधानमंत्री मोदी ने जोर देकर कहा कि भारत ने न तो कभी मध्यस्थता स्वीकार की थी, न करता है और न ही कभी करेगा।
A very important development between India and the United States. Prime Minister Modi had a 35-minute phone conversation with US President Trump. This was the first conversation between Modi and Trump after Operation Sindoor. The phone call was initiated by the White House after Trump had to cut short his G7 visit due to escalating tensions between Iran and Israel. Prime Minister Modi and Donald Trump were supposed to meet in person, and because that could not happen, the White House initiated a phone call. According to Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, Trump expressed condolences for the loss of lives in Pahalgam attack and also vowed to support India against terror. As per Misri, Prime Minister said that India had only targeted Pakistani terror camps in the intervening night of 6th and 7th of May as part of Operation Sindoor to retaliate against Pakistan for the Pahalgam attack. Narendra Modi said India's actions were measured, precise and non-escalatory. The Prime Minister also clarified and reiterated that no trade-related topics were discussed in connection with Operation Sindoor between India and the United States. Prime Minister also said that India never has and never will accept third-party mediation. During the phone call, Prime Minister made it clear that any further acts of terrorism against India will be treated as an act of war. President Trump also invited Narendra Modi to visit US on his way back from Canada, but the Prime Minister declined the invitation due to pre-existing commitments. Donald Trump has also accepted India's invite for the Quad summit in Delhi later this year. What India would also be closely watching out for is the meeting between Pakistani Army Chief General Munir and Trump at the White House. President Trump will be meeting Pakistani Army Chief over lunch. Now, this comes after White House denied inviting Munir to the US Army's 250th anniversary celebrations on the 14th of June. Munir is also expected to meet US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
India and Canada took the first steps to reset the strained relationship. Both nations have agreed to appoint ambassadors after Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. The diplomatic ties were scaled down after Canada had alleged India's involvement in the killing of a Sikh separatist in 2023. Sanjay Suri now joins us from Alberta, Canada, with more on the talks held between the two prime ministers.
After 2 years of a near collapse in relations between India and Canada, the prime ministers of both countries took a giant step forward at the G7 here in Kananaskis with the decision to designate new high commissioners to restore diplomatic services to citizens of both countries. And this marked a major diplomatic breakthrough after a diplomatic war of sorts over the past couple of years when each expelled the High Commissioner of the other and other staff. Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri said the move to appoint the new High Commissioners was only the first in a series of calibrated steps agreed to restore ties towards normal. But already agreement has been reached on a wide number of areas, and these range all the way from cooperation in critical minerals, clean energy, digital infrastructure, AI, supply chains, even more. According to the Canadian readout, the two leaders reaffirmed the importance of Canada-India ties based upon mutual respect, the rule of law, and a commitment to the principle of sovereignty and territorial integrity. Carney, according to the Canadian readout, raised the issue of transnational crime and repression, security and the rules-based order, and that clearly all arose from Canadian concerns since the Niger killing 2 years back. Carney has cautioned that the meeting was foundational, in line with the Indian view that it's all calibrated, and Carney said that a lot of work needs to be done yet ahead. But he also said that the meeting was frank, suggesting that views were expressed rather bluntly.
Well, with that, it's time now for a short break. But coming up, India's aviation regulator says that a surveillance conducted on Air India's 787 fleet following the Ahmedabad plane crash did not reveal any major safety concerns. More on that when we come back. Welcome back. Now, nearly a week after Air India AI-171 plane crash in Ahmedabad, DNA matching has been completed for 190 victims so far. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner aircraft had 242 people on board. Mortal remains of 157 individuals have been handed over to their families. As per the Superintendent of Civil Hospital, Rakesh Joshi, the process of matching the DNA of other victims is still underway. The sole survivor of the plane crash, Ramesh Vishwas, has been discharged from the hospital late last night. And India's aviation regulator, DGCA, has said that 24 of the 33 Boeing 787 aircraft operated by Air India have cleared enhanced safety inspections. CNBC-TV18's Shivani Bazaz is standing by with the latest updates on the enhanced surveillance. Shivani, give us a rundown of where the safety checks stand and what are the takeaways for the airline.
Well, yes, in the aftermath of Air India's Boeing 787 Dreamliner crashing in Ahmedabad, India's aviation regulator met with the airline's top brass to review the airline's safety protocols, maintenance systems and recent operational issues, especially of its fleet of wide-body Boeing 787 Dreamliners, which are used for long-haul flights. And the regulator has confirmed that so far, the surveillance of the fleet has not revealed any major safety concerns. The DGCA says that the aircraft and the maintenance systems used on them were found to be in compliance with existing safety standards. So far, these enhanced safety checks have been completed on 24 of the airline's 33 Dreamliners as of 3 p.m. on the 17th of July. 4 more were in various stages of the exercise at various MRO facilities and will be released from their respective maintenance hangars only once these checks are done and the aircrafts are cleared. The rest are scheduled to undergo these checks as soon as they return to India. However, the DGCA did raise some concerns over recent maintenance-related issues that have cropped up and been flagged at the airline internally. In this context, the aviation watchdog has advised Tata-owned Air India to strengthen coordination between engineering, operations and ground handling teams and to ensure the timely availability of spare parts to minimize passenger delays. Now, Air India has cancelled 83 flights between the 12th and the 17th of June. Of these, 66 flights were to be flown using Boeing 787 Dreamliners. Some flights have also been delayed. The airline has clarified earlier that these have not been due to technical snags. The DGCA has now confirmed this, saying the enhanced security and safety checks, maintenance schedules and new airspace restrictions like the closure of Iranian airspace have forced the airline to rework its flight schedules. Back to you.
Hindustan Zinc shares fell after its promoter Vedanta sold 1.6% equity in the company worth 3,000 crore rupees in block deals. 1.71% equity changed hands at 460 rupees per share in block deals. Vedanta said that it sold stake to strengthen its balance sheet. Hindustan Zinc has also said that it will invest 12,000 crore rupees to increase zinc, lead and silver output. The company intends to raise production by 250,000 tons per annum over the next 36 months. And Transport and Highway Minister Nitin Gadkari has said that the government will introduce a FASTag-based annual pass priced at 3,000 rupees. In a post on X, Gadkari said that the pass will be issued from August 15th and will be available only for private vehicles. The pass will be valid for a year after date of activation or up to 200 trips, whichever comes first. The CEO of BSE believes a Thursday expiry of weekly futures and options contract is not a bad choice. This comes a day after SEBI approved the stock exchange's proposal while allowing a Tuesday expiry for rival NSE. Ramamurthy, the CEO of BSE, says that there are advantages in shifting the expiry days to Thursdays.
And if you look at the international scenario, B is US, B is Eurex, be it Korea, Taiwan, Kospi basically I'm talking about, Japan, many of them have their expiries on Thursdays or Fridays. So if you're thinking of relative value trading, Thursday becomes an ideal day.
Well, here's a look at some global headlines. At least 70 Palestinians have been killed and hundreds have been injured after Israeli forces opened fire on crowds waiting for aid in Gaza Strip's Khan Yunis. The attack involved tank shells, drones and machine guns. Since the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation began distribution of aid in May, over 300 people have died while trying to collect aid. Hospitals in the region are overwhelmed and severely under-resourced. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky left the G7 summit without a joint statement of support from members or a chance to meet US President Donald Trump amidst the war with Russia. Zelensky told G7 leaders that diplomacy is in crisis and urged them to push the US President Donald Trump to use his influence to end the war. However, the silver lining for the Ukraine was that Canada announced $1.47 billion in new military assistance for Kyiv, as well as new financial sanctions on Russia. Mount Lebo Laki in Indonesia has erupted, sending towers of ash cloud 11 kilometers in the air. The smoke from volcano was visible from cities nearly 150 kilometers away. No casualties have been reported so far, but authorities have issued a high alert. Residents have been warned to stay cautious as heavy rains could trigger lava flows. Dozens of flights to and fro from Indonesian island of Bali have been cancelled or delayed. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business 360. More news and updates continue right here on CNBC-TV18.